Comment on the video, where are people watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. My name is Daniel Whitaker, and I prided myself on simple pleasures, a perfectly risen sourdough loaf, Saturday morning jazz, and a driveway wide enough for my fishing boat and 2 classic Triumphs. I live at 23 Sycamore Bend Drive in Larkspur Ridge Meadows, a sleepy enclave of cedar-paned cottages and neatly trimmed hedges. That peace dissolved the morning Marjorie Sloan treated my driveway like a freeway on-ramp. Marjorie is the neighborhood's self-appointed taste police, platinum bob, neon workout gear, and a voice that commands more attention than a thunderclap. Her vehicle of choice is a massive Rangestar XL, which she would idle half on my asphalt, half on my lawn, as though my property line was merely a suggestion. The first time I replaced my mailbox, smashed into kindling by her overlarge tires, I chalked it up to carelessness. By the fourth, I knew it was warfare. I tried friendliness. One evening, I waved a mason jar of iced tea, invited Marjorie to sit a spell, and asked kindly if she might stick to Sycamore Lane. She laughed, a sound that froze my blood, and extolled her shortcut as fuel conservation and community synergy. Next, I pinned laminated signs, private drive, please respect property lines. By morning, each sign lay under her tires like discarded napkins. But the coup de grace was her backroad rally, a weekly minivan meetup she orchestrated on my U-shaped apron just before school drop-off. I'd watch parents spin donuts across my prize lilac borders, uprooting years of growth for the sake of her convenience. As I stood ankle-deep in torn petals, clutching a dead bloom, I realized my usual calm would not suffice. Larkspur Ridge's covenants are clear, homeowner property lines are inviolate. I needed a remedy no Rangestar could breach. Thus Operation Cedar Bastion was born. A 10-foot wall of interlocking spruce boards, stained, woodland umber, running the length of my frontage. It would unequivocally reroute even the most determined shortcutters. But first, I needed approval. The Larkspur Ridge Neighborhood Council is notoriously strict about exterior changes, unless, of course, you come bearing chocolate chip cookies. Its president, Mrs. Eugenia Hawthorne, values adherence to bylaws and homemade baked goods above almost all else. I spent Saturday afternoon photographing tire ruts, drafting a fence blueprint per Section 6.3 of the Architectural Harmony Guidelines, and baking a fresh batch of still-warm cookies. At the Wednesday council meeting, I presented my evidence, design, and cookies. The ruts provoked sympathetic murmurs. The lattice-top design passed a vote of 6-1, one butterfly-concerned holdout. Mrs. Hawthorne pocketed a cookie with a nod and slid me the signed permit. Walking out beneath bulletin board flyers praising community character, I felt a rare thrill. My defense had official sanction. Little did I know, unveiling the fence would ignite Marjorie Sloan's fury in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But as I wiped flour from my hands later that night, I felt ready. My sourdough could wait. War had come to Sycamore Bend. Thursday dawned bright, and my crew from Evergreen Timberworks arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. Foreman Harold drove a pickup with trailer. Behind it, cedar posts taller than most front doors lay gleaming in morning light. I'd chosen interlocking spruce boards for strength, each plank pre-cut to 10 feet to prevent any Rangestar's tires from clearing the top. We began by marking post locations 5 feet apart. I paced the length of the frontage, flagging each spot with orange survey tape. Neighbors paused on their porches, some with congratulatory waves, others with skeptical frowns. Marjorie Sloan, peering from across the street, narrowed her eyes but said nothing. Harold's team set hydraulic augers to spin, digging post holes 2 feet wide and 3 feet deep. Soil shot into neat corkscrews, landing like rusty confetti. We poured quickset concrete, jammed in the cedar posts, then plumbed each one with a level. By midday, the skeleton of a fortress stood tall. Lunch arrived courtesy of a neighborhood potluck, fried chicken, potato salad, and Mrs. Layla Cordray's legendary rhubarb pie. I offered plates to Harold and crew, watched Marjorie's shortcut social caravan slow to a halt just beyond the work zone. She poked her head out a minivan window and hollered, "Are we under martial law now?" I raised a paper plate. "Only protecting property lines," I called back, and she snapped the window shut. Some bystanders stifled giggles. Afternoon brought the horizontal rails, 4 layers of solid spruce, each slotted into stainless steel brackets on the posts. The fence already looked imposing, an unbroken wood ribbon, lattice top for aesthetic grace and light. Harold tested the design. He knelt on the second rail, then the third. "No give. Solid as your sourdough," he joked. Next came staining. We applied 2 coats of woodland umber, Loviosi formula, brushing in vertical strokes to reveal cedar grain. The smell of pine and stain mingled like Christmas and Sunday evening. Spritzes of rain threatened but held off, as though the weather itself respected the endeavor. By Tuesday evening, the last lattice cap was fastened. Workers packed tools, their hands black with stain. Harold thumbs-upped me. "Lockdown, Daniel. Pretty wall." I shook his hand, gratitude in my chest. He refused payment in cookies, asking instead to borrow my boat for a summer outing. "Truce," he winked. I agreed. That night, I wandered outside with Duke, my loyal mutt, who sniffed every plank and lattice joint. I poured a glass of iced tea and admired the barrier's silhouettes against moonlight. It felt triumphant, a boundary and a statement. But I knew the real test came when Marjorie Sloane first dared to challenge it. Thursday morning, I awakened to 3 emails, the first from Mrs. Cordray, thanking me for preserving her vegetable garden's southern exposure, the second from Mr. Patel, expressing relief that Larkspur Ridge would no longer endure Range Star tire tracks, the third, from Marjorie. Subject line, community comments on new fence. I steeled myself and opened it. "Daniel, your fence is an eyesore. You've turned our tight-knit community into a fortress. This violates Section 4.2, fences must promote openness. I demand you remove it immediately or face further action." I leaned back, heart racing. Further action? She threatened legal letters, complaints, maybe even code enforcement visits. But I had the signed permit. I had 600 pages of council minutes. And I had the faint but powerful conviction that property lines still mattered. I drafted a calm reply, "Marjorie, the fence meets all HOA specs, height, color, material, design. Your concerns fall under aesthetic preference, not code. Please refer to Section 6.3 for specifics. I welcome a site visit with our council's architectural liaison if you wish to discuss further. Regards, Daniel Whitaker." I pressed send, sipped my tea, and let the early summer breeze carry Duke's tail wag of approval. The fortress was in place. Now, let battle commence. Friday morning broke with urgency. I'd barely poured coffee when a cacophony of car horns shattered the calm. Through the kitchen window I saw Marjorie Sloane's Range Star XL parked nose to fence, engine revving in rapid staccato. A convoy of suburban diverters followed, minivans, SUVs, hatchbacks, all lined up as though awaiting instruction. Duke and I stepped outside. Marjorie flung open her door, stilettos slipping on gravel. She stormed forward, waving a printed HOA newsletter. "Daniel," she shouted. "This monstrosity is a violation of everything this community stands for." I set down my mug and approached, hands open. "Morning, Ms. Sloane. Something wrong?" "Wrong?" she repeated, voice thick with indignation. "Everything's wrong. You cut us off. You barricaded our passage. I tapped the fence. I erected a fence on my property, per permit. The shortcut remains open on Sycamore Lane." She huffed as if outraged by my breathing. "I'm calling the county." She whipped out a smartphone. "This is criminal. Trespass. Damage to community spirit." I sighed. A permit obtained, posted on the community board. "The only trespassers here have been your tires." Without warning, she retrieved a collapsible step ladder from her cargo mat, the one labeled, emergency kit. She propped it against the cedar and began hoisting herself up. Boards creaked ominously. "I'll show you how wrong you are," she declared. I rushed forward. "Please, this is private property. Step down." She waved me off, teetering at the top rung. "I have rights." At that moment, a patrol SUV coasted around the corner, Deputy Marcus Reese and Rookie Laney Chin aboard. Marjorie shrieked, "Help! He's blocking access." Her foot slipped, she grabbed the lattice, splintering wood. She tumbled, landing awkwardly in mulch. I knelt to help her, but she scuttled away, phone still recording. Deputy Reese and Chin strode up. Reese's expression was a blend of empathy and disbelief. "Ms. Sloan, are you all right?" he asked. She rubbed her elbow, glaring. "I've been attacked with a fence," she spat. "He's illegal." Reese shook his head. "Sir." I gestured calmly. "Deputy, I built this fence on my land with HOA approval." I handed him the permit and plans. Chen chimed in, "We've had multiple trespass complaints about a vehicle driving onto Mr. Whitaker's property." She showed dashcam stills of muddy tire tracks leading up the driveway. Marjorie's face drained of color. "That was, for efficiency." Reese turned back to her. "Ma'am, consider this your official warning. Any further unauthorized entry will result in a citation." He glanced at the shattered lattice. "And damaging that fence could lead to vandalism charges." Marjorie straightened, dignity reassembling around her like a damp cloak. She nodded once, stiffly. I offered her a hand, but she brushed it away and stalked to her range star. Before gunning the engine, she shot me a look that promised retribution. Once they left, I found debris from the ladder and a single stiletto heel sunk in mulch. Duke sniffed it, then trotted away, to chase a squirrel, entirely unbothered by human dramas. Inside, I cleaned my splintered fence with sandpaper and stain, marveling at its resilience. Then I checked my inbox. Marjorie had fired off another HOA complaint, this time about excessive shade on her tulips. I forwarded it to Mrs. Hawthorne with a photo of my permit and a succinct note, "Shade approved." That evening, as the neighborhood settled, I sat on my porch with a fresh loaf of sourdough. I felt both weary and vindicated. The fortress had held. Yet in the back of my mind, I sensed Marjorie brooding, plotting her next move like a storm gathering offshore. But for now, Sycamore Bend lay peaceful once more, the cedar wall glowing amber in the porch light, sentinel and symbol of boundaries respected. Monday morning brought crisp air and a fresh challenge, a cluster of pink-bordered complaint flyers pinned to my mailbox. Each read, "Fence creates hazardous blind spot, unsafe for children." They were unsigned but printed on the same lilac-scented stationery Marjorie favored. I crumpled the stack and pocketed them, then called Deputy Chen to report suspected misuse of HOA property for harassment. She thanked me and opened a case file labeled, "Fence Flyers." Meanwhile, Marjorie Sloan escalated silently. Overnight, someone had uprooted my milkweed seedlings and scattered their soil across the mulch bed. I found them in the morning, roots exposed, wilted. Footprints nearby, small, stiletto-shaped, led toward the corner where her range star often sat. I replanted the seedlings and installed a discreet camera aimed at the fence perimeter. That night, at 2:11 a.m., the footage caught Marjorie, or someone remarkably similar, prying zip ties from the gate latch with a pair of engravable pruning shears monogrammed MS. Deputy Reese arrived within minutes. He found Marjorie stumbling on the curb in stilettos, hands muddy. At the precinct, under the fluorescent glare of booking photos, Marjorie insisted she'd loaned the shears to a gardening friend. Officers exchanged glances. When Deputy Chen noted mud matching my mulch, Marjorie's protest collapsed into a sulky silence. Charges were filed, attempted vandalism, misdemeanor, and trespassing, civil infraction. The magistrate offered a plea deal, 200 hours community service, a mixed-use workshop, and reimbursement for plant damage, or pay a $500 fine plus court costs. Marjorie, steely-eyed, chose the workshop, likely expecting a short seminar and herbal tea. On Wednesday, the workshop commenced under the guidance of Dr. Louise Nguyen, a no-nonsense mediator whose resume boasted resolving hostage crises and boardroom standoffs. 30 minutes in, she surveyed our circle, Marjorie in practical sneakers, me in jeans, a handful of curious neighbors, and set ground rules: speak your truth. Listen without judgment. The exercise began with each participant sharing a community gripe in one sentence. When it reached Marjorie, she whispered, "Driveways shouldn't be privatized." Dr. Nguyen asked for specifics. Marjorie faltered, citing loss of convenience and threat to social cohesion. Duke napped at my feet as I interjected calmly, "I never privatized, I reclaimed my property." A quieter woman, Mrs. Janet Pruitt, then spoke about losing her Sunday stroll when the fence blocked her shortcut. "I felt unwelcome," she said. Marjorie's lips trembled, empathy flickered in her eyes. The next exercise paired us for conflict resolution role-play. I was to be the homeowner explaining property lines, Marjorie, the citizen seeking community access. She listened intently when I outlined the legal boundaries and the emotional toll of repeated trespass. Her response was halting but sincere. "Didn't realize how much respect mattered to you." The room softened. Mrs. Cordray, once outraged by the fence, nodded and later complimented Marjorie on her candor. Over 6 weeks, Marjorie completed gardening demonstrations, litter sweeps, and neighborhood outreach, earning each service hour. She even helped me replant a second row of milkweed, her hands cautious in the soil she once trampled. A memorable day was the fence beautification workshop, where she suggested adding climbing roses to the waves of cedar. We agreed it would help butterflies and soften the wood's visual impact. By late spring, Larkspur Ridge Meadows viewed the cedar wall as part of the landscape, its lattice entwined with budding roses, its wood grain a backdrop for hummingbirds. Mrs. Hawthorne praised the collaboration, awarding Marjorie a certificate of community stewardship. At summer's peak, Marjorie organized a slow ride parade on Sycamore Lane, residents driving at 15 miles per hour to enjoy hummingbirds and roses. She parked 3 minivans well clear of my driveway, each driver waving at my porch, where Duke and I waved back. Deputy Chen closed her case file and delivered a small plaque. "Boundaries built on respect," signed by Dr. Nguyen and the neighborhood council. I displayed it in my dining room, next to sourdough proofs, as testament to conflict resolved through law, empathy, and garden gloves. Summer in Larkspur Ridge Meadows arrived on a wave of cicada hums and rose-scented breezes. The cedar fence, now draped in climbing roses, blended seamlessly with the landscape. Purple coneflowers lined its base, meticulously planted by a committee of neighbors, including, to my mild surprise, Marjorie Sloan. One evening, Mrs. Eugenia Hawthorne delivered a wicker basket of lavender-scented scones to my front porch, announcing, "Council decided to rename the pedestrian path past your gate. It's now Whitaker Way, for walkers only." She winked and added, "Your fence taught us that private property can enhance our community, not isolate it." I sampled a scone, tasting lemon and chamomile, and felt a warmth beyond sugar. From my porch swing, I watched children chalking hopscotch grids along Whitaker Way, seniors strolling after dinner, and dogs sniffing the blooming milkweed. Duke padded alongside, tail wagging. Harmony had returned. A local magazine soon caught wind of our story. Reporter Lisa Henderson showed up with a camera crew to film a feature, "How a Sourdough Baker and a Cedar Gate Saved a Neighborhood." She interviewed me, talking up citizen action, legal safeguards, and the surprising power of baked goods. Then she turned to Marjorie in her sensible loafers. "What changed?" Marjorie paused, glancing at the roses climbing the lattice. "I suppose I learned that community isn't just about convenience. It's about respect. And sometimes walls aren't barriers but invitations to dialogue." Her words, delivered sincerely, echoed the journey she'd taken from adversary to advocate. That weekend, I towed my boat, Patience, to the nearby lake with Harold from Evergreen Timberworks. He'd become a friend. We caught 2 bass, grilled them over an open fire, and toasted cedar, community, and second chances. When I later returned home, I found a small package on my porch, lavender-colored loafers, boxed with a note, for walks on Whitaker Way in style. MS. I slipped them on, incredulous and amused. They fit perfectly. By early fall, the fence's lattice had matured into a canopy of blossoms. Neighbors planted bulbs along its length for spring tulips. A spontaneous fence fest arose each September, potlucks held in my driveway turned commons, acoustic guitars strumming, children giggling on lemonade stands. Even the retired Mr. Patel, once the lone butterfly dissenter, hosted monarch butterfly releases among the milkweed. Marjorie organized garden and gate tours, inviting residents to admire property lines and landscaping highlights. She proudly pointed out my sourdough loaf-shaped planter, an homage to my culinary hobby. And I reciprocated by praising her rose trellis innovation. We'd come far from that first hostile meeting. One crisp evening, I found Marjorie quietly wiping dew from the wooden plaque at the gate, boundaries built on respect. She looked up, surprised I'd seen her. Just reflecting, she said. I offered her a mug of hot cocoa, seasonal evolution from iced tea. She accepted. We sat on my porch swing, Duke curled at our feet, and watched stars emerge. You know, Marjorie mused, I almost missed the drama. I laughed. I'll save it for karaoke night. The final flourish came when Mrs. Cordray suggested erecting a small pergola at the corner of Whitaker Way, a tribute to Silas Whitaker, the original pioneer who planted the first cedars here nearly a century ago. Neighbors crowdfunded the lumber, Harold oversaw construction, and by winter, the pergola stood, rustic cedar beams, crown-topped with solar lanterns. We named it Silas Arbor. Now, on any given evening, you'll find neighbors gathering beneath Silas Arbor, reading books, playing ukuleles, or simply lingering in conversation. My driveway no longer hears tire squeals or honking horns, only laughter, footsteps, and the occasional scrape of a rocking chair. I often catch myself marveling at the transformation, from conflict to community, from solitary sourdough baker to reluctant neighborhood hero. Duke, perched on the porch rail, yawns in approval. When new residents ask about the fence, I smile and say, it's less a barrier than a doorway, to respect, dialogue, and a sense of home. And as autumn leaves drift across Whitaker Way, I know this is the melody of true harmony, boundaries honored, bridges built, and the gentle rhythm of neighbors living, and thriving, together. Early winter brought a fresh flurry of headlines. Carolina Today, a regional lifestyle magazine, ran a feature titled, How One Baker Fenced in Respect, the Sourdough Savior of Larkspur Ridge. Their article traced my saga, from mailbox skirmishes to Operation Cedar Bastion, through Marjorie Sloane's meltdown, and on to the restorative peace of Whitaker Way and Silas Arbor. Photos showcased the rose-clad cedar fence, the monarch mural, and neighbors enjoying potlucks beneath the pergola. I received calls from distant suburbs, emails from community planning blogs, and even an invitation to speak at the South Carolina Urban Design Forum. All of this made me simultaneously proud and slightly queasy. I'm a baker, not a blogger. But the story wasn't about me. It was about citizen power harnessed for common good. Then came the big break. Veteran journalist Lisa Henderson, fresh from her Village Voice stint, proposed a 10-minute segment for Metro Morning News. She filmed interviews with Mrs. Cordray, Mr. Patel, Deputy Chen, Harold, and even Marjorie, now sporting her lavender loafers and helping visitors plant spring bulbs. The evening the piece aired, my phone rang non-stop. Clips circulated on social media under hashtags like #FenceThatHeals and #NeighborsNotNIMBY. Within days the National Civic Alliance invited me to join a panel on suburban renewal through community action. I confess, the idea of traveling to Washington, D.C. felt surreal. But I accepted, both to spotlight Larkspur Ridge's example and to honor the collaborative spirit that made it possible. Back home, the fence's cedar boards, once a stark barrier, had softened into a living community canvas. Children painted seasonal murals on its lattice, while local artists hung tiny birdhouses along its length. The pergola's lanterns glowed into night, guiding winter walkers along the now officially named Whitaker Way. One crisp afternoon, a delegation of council members from neighboring Willow Glen estates toured our transformation. They measured post heights, sampled my sourdough, and asked detailed questions about HOA protocols and conflict resolution. Marjorie, now unrecognizable in a cozy sweater rather than neon gear, led the tour with practiced grace, pointing out the milkweed corridor and the monarch mural's symbolism of change. That evening, as snowflakes began to dust the cedar railings, the Larkspur Ridge Neighborhood Council gathered for its annual holiday party at my garage-turned community center. Mrs. Hawthorne, radiant in a pine cone brooch, stood at the podium. "Fellow neighbors," she began, "this year we witnessed the power of civility, creativity, and yes, a well-built fence, to unite us." She paused, then looked at me. "Daniel, thank you for teaching us boundaries aren't walls, but invitations to respect one another's space." I stood to raise a mug of mulled cider. "To Larkspur Ridge," I said, "and to every community brave enough to build a better tomorrow." Applause filled the garage-turned hull. Duke barked his own approval. As guests mingled, a familiar black SUV rolled slowly outside. Marjorie emerged, now manager of the garden center at Greenwood Nurseries, carrying a crate of seed packets. She approached me with a sheepish smile. "I've prepared community seed kits," she said, handing over lavender, rose, and milkweed seeds for every household. "For next spring." I hugged her, an embrace decades in the making. "Thank you." That night, after neighbors departed and the last lantern dimmed, I stepped outside into the cold hush of snowfall. The cedar fence gleamed under streetlights, each post a testament to perseverance and partnership. Not a single snowdrift crossed my driveway. I breathed deep, cedar, cold air, the faint hum of distant traffic, and felt an abiding sense of home. Miles from the rancor of petty complaints, I'd found a blueprint for community that stretched far beyond Sycamore Bend. And as I waved at the softly glowing pergola, I knew that whatever challenges 2025 might bring, Larkspur Ridge now had the spirit, and the fences, to face them together.